So Isaac, assuming that you are ready, I'll pass on the presentation to you. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Can you hear me well?
Perfectly.
All right. Just 1 second. There you go. Very good morning, everyone. My name is Isaac Triguero, and I'm presenting the work, A Local Search with a Surrogate Assisted Option for Instance Reduction, that I've done in collaboration with my colleague Ferrante Neri. We are both at the School of Computer Science of the University of Nottingham. So this is the outline of the presentation. First of all, I'm gonna try to motivate why we did this work, introducing the concept of instance reduction. Then I will present the local search and the surrogate model that we prepare for instance reduction, followed by some experiments and some conclusions and future work that we are currently doing. So first of all, what is instance reduction? So when in data science we try to gather some knowledge from data, we normally follow a cycle like the one on the right hand side of the slide. So first we want to specify the problem, understand the problem, and then clean a bit the data. And before you do any machine learning or data mining, you first of all do some data pre-processing. That could be, for example, missing values imputation or dimensionality reduction, feature selection, and so forth. In particular, in this work, we are interested in something called instance reduction. Instance reduction is within the context of supervised classification. So meaning that we have labels, right, for all the instances, and what we want to do is to reduce the number of instances that we use to train. Most of the research that has been done in the past for instance reduction has been motivated by the... Can you hear me?
Sorry for interrupting you. You are seeing your main screen and not the slides. Oh. So
okay,
something wrong out there. I'm assuming you have two monitors, right?
Yes, so that's probably why. Okay.
So yeah, so you need to change that.
What I was saying before, thank you for interrupting. And so what I'm trying to say here is, what is instance reduction? So instance reduction falls within data pre-processing, which is all about trying to clean the data to use something more compact, something that is more representative of the original data, that is the data mining or machine learning process that goes right after that. What I'm talking about here in this paper is all about supervised classification. And most of the research in this area was motivated by the nearest neighbor classifier. That was a very good classifier, well-known classifier, but as you know, it has plenty of weaknesses. And many of the research papers that are out there are about improving this classifier. However, you will see that this is actually useful for other classifiers as well. How do we do that? Well, by either selecting or generating new instances from the original training data. So the classic approach is called instance selection, that is probably known by most of you. So basically the idea is, with a big training data set, we're going to apply an instance selection algorithm, and then we obtain a reduced set of instances that will be used as an input for a data mining algorithm. So we learn with that reduced set rather than the big set. And then we just classify whenever we have some test data. This problem has been solved with evolutionary algorithms, modeling this as a binary search problem. However, we can be more general, we can be more flexible with something called instance generation that can actually do both. Could select something from the training data, but could also actually generate new ones. So if you look at the right hand side, what you can see is a classification problem in which the actual decision boundaries is drawn here. So we have red class and blue class. So the thing is, with instance selection, you are assuming that the data points that you have in the training set, they define perfectly those decision boundaries. Instance generation is more flexible and allows you to create new artificial points that could actually represent better the decision boundaries between classes. So this is the setting we're going to focus on, and the main advantage of any instance selection or instance reduction technique is that they reduce a lot the storage requirements, they allow you to remove noisy samples, and more importantly, it speeds up the final learning process that you have right after that. When you're modeling this from the optimization point of view, there are two main challenges. The first one is the high dimensionality of the problem. For any single instance that you keep in that reduced set, it has n features. So it's n-dimensional times the number of instances. In the literature, what we have seen is plenty of evolutionary algorithms showing that they perform really well in doing this task. However, the computational cost of the fitness function evaluation is really, really high, because this typically consists of classifying the entire training data. So in the literature recently, what you see is approaches based on big data technologies like, for example, Apache Spark or Apache Hadoop, that allows you to run those techniques using multiple computers at the same time. But this is not reducing the computational complexity. It's just simply allowing you to run those techniques that are very time consuming. So for this reason is why we see there is a need for something simpler, faster, but still powerful search algorithms for instance reduction. So as I just said, evolutionary algorithms were really good, but they require big data solutions. Simpler algorithms that are non-evolutionary algorithms, they have shown to decrease the classification performance. So what we want to do in this work is to reduce the cost of instance reduction by using a very simple and naive local search, which is suitable for large-scale problems, with a surrogate local model if we want to reduce even more the number of objective function calls. So I'm gonna introduce the method now. So basically, as any prototype instance generation technique, we start off from a training set that looks like this. So it could be represented as a matrix in which we have a number of instances and they have a number of features. So for example, this could be people, a number of features like age, height, and so forth, and a label at the very end. The objective is to come up with something way smaller in the sense of number of instances, right? So the number of rows in the next matrix in the right side should be way smaller and should still be able to represent the training set. The proposed local search for this, for instance, reduction that we propose here is based on greedy search of the family of pattern search algorithms. The first thing that we do quite different from the literature is, rather than representing this as a matrix, we're going to represent that as an array that basically concatenate every single row like this. Every single instance is concatenated. And then what we're going to be doing is to perturbate one by one, motivated by the idea this is actually a larger scale optimization problem and has been shown in the past that the most effective way to deal with those is to go variable by variable, which is quite different from the literature that typically just basically combines instance 2 and instance 1, for example, and combine these two to create a new one. So the algorithm is initialized in the following way. So we're gonna start off from the training set, right? But we obtain an initial reduced set based on a parameter that tells you how much you want to reduce. In this preliminary work, we have followed a stratified random selection. What does it mean? So it means that we're gonna try to obtain a random selection from the training set, but respecting the regional distribution of the classes. So if in the original training set, we have something like 60% of class A and 40% of class B, we're gonna keep that stratified selection in the reduced set. How do we create new solutions? So we're gonna, as I said, perturb each variable at a time. And whenever we make something that looks better, we are gonna update X. We're gonna update the solution. How we do this? So we're gonna try first in one direction, following the formula you have on this slide. So basically, we're gonna subtract an exploratory radius, right? Step size. And if that works, we replace X. If not, we're gonna try in the opposite direction using half of that step. So it's a very simple local search in which what we're gonna be doing is perturbate all of them in this for loop. We try in one direction. If that works, we replace it. If not, we try in the other direction. And then if we replace it, if we have obtained a better fitness. So if we end up doing the whole loop and we do not improve the performance, what we're gonna be doing is to decrease that step size, because probably it's too big and it's making too much of a hassle on the search. If you're wondering how we handle whenever we go above or below the range, we're going to be using toroidal approach for that. You can see more details in the paper. I'm happy to explain that if you have any questions. So this is the local search, which is probably the simplest way we could think of for instance reduction. And then when my colleague Ferrante and I were discussing, okay, we want to build a surrogate model for this, how do we do it? So the first thing that we wanted to say and acknowledge is that in the field of instance reduction, there is no fitness landscape analysis that can tell you, okay, how multimodal is the problem. And also it very much depends on which data set, which classification data set you're using. So based on that, we thought that the natural choice for this was to simply use a multivariate linear regression with least square method to approximate the fitness function. So basically what we're going to be doing is for n+1 observations, we're going to be using the local search I just explained. And whenever we have these n+1 solutions, we use their fitness values as well. So we're going to try to establish a correlation between the location of the instances and their fitness values to predict, whenever we have a new solution, to predict the fitness values, basically. So basically, we've got two different steps. The first step is to build the surrogate. So for n+1, until we obtain n+1 solutions, we're gonna just apply the local search as before, and we're gonna store any solution that we come up with and their fitness into a data structure. At the end of this while loop, you should have n+1 points, right? Whenever we have that, we build a local multivariable linear model. For the remaining function calls is when we actually apply the surrogate model. I wanted to clarify here, we're gonna follow a very, very conservative approach. So we basically want to make sure that the surrogate model does not mislead the search. And that means that whenever the surrogate model tells you, okay, the predicted fitness is better than what we have so far, we are gonna still calculate the actual fitness, right? So we're gonna just discard based on the surrogate, but we never accept something correct if the surrogate did not really provide a good approximation. So we do that exactly as we did before. So we're gonna try in one direction. If not, we try in the other direction, and we always ensure that the surrogate is not misleading the search. We repeat step 1 and step 2 until some stopping criterion has been reached. So basically this is the algorithm. It's quite simple, I believe. And this is the experimental study that we follow to test the algorithm. So we focus on the experimental setting that we suggested before in this review paper about instance generation. So we use from there 40 small standard classification datasets and a 10 for cross-validation. And we compare against all the techniques that were proposed in here, plus 2 more recent evolutionary algorithms based on differential evolution. And this one is also a differential evolution, but also a hybrid instance selection and instance generation technique. In terms of performance measure, we're gonna look at the classification accuracy using the nearest neighbor as baseline and the reduction rate. So we do not need anything more complicated because it's just simply a standard classification in which the distribution of the classes is mostly balanced. There are a few parameters that we have explored, and in here, in this preliminary setting, we basically set up this to 100 times the number of dimensions, and row, the step size is just set to 0.4. It could be, we need to do more, and we acknowledge that, but for now, for this preliminary study, we wanted to see what happened with this simple solution. So in this table, you can see the average results on the 40 data sets. On the left-hand side, you see the reduction rate. We have simply set that we wanted 95% mostly average, let's say, on the reduction rate. That's why our algorithm, these two, LS, IR, SA, LS, IR, they set in the same boundary, let's say. There are other methods that do not actually use a parameter for this, but they decide how many instances per class they want to show. So they have a bit of an advantage there, and they actually come up with something even better. Sometimes they reduce even more. So this is something we want to work on in the future. Training accuracy, well, we put this here just to show that with this very simple local search, we have actually overfitting quite a lot the training set, meaning that we can represent the original training set very, very well. However, when it comes down to predicting tests, we have probably overfit because the performance dropped quite a bit. But what is interesting to show here is these are our two proposals, right? What is very interesting to see is that we are better than the nearest neighbor classifier, which is the baseline. This one uses all the data. We, with only 95% of data, we are better than that. And the only methods that are better in terms of performance compared to us are based on PSO, differential evolution, and the best algorithm so far is still a hybrid instance selection, instance generation, that they do way more stuff and they perform way more evaluations. Statistically, you see that this hybrid method I just mentioned is much better than the rest for now, statistically significant. When you compare our local search against the surrogate assisted model, you still see that the local search is better significantly compared to the surrogate variation. However, although it's significant, we believe it's kind of marginal because it's around 0.5% on average. And we are saving around 15% of the valuations. It's not much, but as I said before, it's very much, let's say, a preliminary work what we are presenting in here. So this is all I wanted to mention. So in conclusion, we have proposed a simple, naive local search that addresses the challenges imposed by instance reduction. It is a very simple algorithm. It is still not the state of the art, but we can see that it's quite competitive without using any sophisticated population-based approaches. What we are working at the moment, we are looking at that initialization mechanisms that I was mentioning is a bit of a weakness that we know. We know that the comparison in terms of runtime and number of evaluations is not quite fair yet, and we want to explore more larger classification data sets. So that's all I wanted to tell. Hope you could hear me well. And I'm gonna check the chat to see how do I. Oops. Chat.
So it's time for questions now, I guess.
Yes.
Thanks for your presentation, Isaac. It was very lively. We have, well, I see you cannot see the chat, so I'll read out the question for you. It's a question from Nuno Lourenço. Is thanking you for your talk, and he has a question regarding slide 15. He's asking, are the computational resources the same for all algorithms?
Well, in this particular comparison, no, we didn't, but we are not presenting any runtime. So basically, this is just one core. So basically running one single computer. That's so, I mean, in terms of classification accuracy or reduction rate, it's not affected by how many computers or resources we use. Is that clear?
And in terms of evaluations, is
yes,
it?
So, okay, I understand that. So yes, so this is the main thing. So in instance reduction in the past, they didn't really focus on a very fair number of evaluations because most of the algorithms that we have in this slide, they're actually not evolutionary algorithms, right? So it's only 3 or 4 of them. And at the time, they didn't really care about how many evaluations they did. So when we compare with the current state of the art, but there is something to be changed here. And that's what we are working at the moment. We want to make sure that we establish a fair comparison. I can tell you that the number of evaluations we are using is less than what they are using because they basically just set up a population size and a number of generations and that's it. And they actually do this one, for example, does 2 different evolutionary algorithms. So yes, it's not fair enough yet, but that's what we are working on.
You are working on it. Okay, I guess that answers the question. We have a second question from, I'm going to risk the name, Harmin, and is asking, do you specify the dimensions of the individuals manually, and is this sensitive to the performance?
Yes, so if I understand the question correctly, the individual is just one single solution, right? and the size. So that depends on a parameter that determine how much we want to reduce the original training set. So in this solution, in this experimental setting, we are reducing up to 95%. So that gives you just 5% of the original training set. Depending on how big the training set was for a particular classification problem, you will have a bigger or a smaller individual.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have lots of questions now.
That's good.
I'll take one more from Ilya Bakurov. Hello, Ilya. How are you? So he's saying maybe I have missed it during the presentation, but when performing algorithms assessment, did you consider classifiers performance without instance reduction?
So yes, so this is the case of the baseline that we have here. So can you still see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Yes, so the one that says NN, nearest neighbor, is the one without any instance reduction. So what we can see is surprisingly, you can reduce up to 95% and still be able to perform better. Why? Because basically we are removing redundant and noisy instances from the training set. We are creating something that is more representative.
Okay, I'll do one more question. I'm doing all the questions, which is a little bit strange, but I'll take two that are correlated. And basically, they are asking if there is any particular reason why the surrogate model is underperforming. And could this be related with the small size of the data set? Yeah,
well, I guess, I mean, it is quite well known that surrogate models will not always achieve the same performance as the original search algorithm, right? But I believe in this case, we want to work a bit more on understanding how well it's predicting the fitness values. And I believe in some cases, it's just misleading the search and discarding good solutions. So if you remember quickly the actual, how the algorithm works, it is only, let's say, using the surrogate and, well, reclassifying the whole thing whenever the surrogate says that the fitness is going to be better, but it might be that sometimes it's not quite precise and therefore it makes a mistake. It says it's not a good solution and it disregards that solution, but it shouldn't. So that's why probably sometimes it doesn't converge as quickly.
Okay, I guess that's a great answer. Thank you again for your presentation. We need
to listening
to move on to the next speaker.